The morning sun glanced off the glass facade of Harrington Global, a Fortune 500 giant rooted in the heart of Manhattan. The building stretched into the sky, its mirrored windows catching every ray of light, as if to remind the city who controlled the skyline. Claire Miller stood on the sidewalk, staring up for a moment too long. She tugged nervously at the sleeve of her second-hand blazer, then stepped into the revolving doors. Her reflection in the glass, a young woman with determined hazel eyes and a folder, clutched tight against her chest, looked smaller than she wanted to feel. Inside the lobby buzzed with quiet authority. Polished marble floors reflected the chandelier's glow, while men in sharp suits tapped on their phones as if entire markets depended on the speed of their thumbs. A receptionist with perfect posture greeted visitors in a practiced tone. Claire smoothed her skirt and tried to walk like she belonged, but the truth pressed on her chest. She was a small-town girl who had clawed her way here on scholarships and night shifts at a diner. The contrast between her scuffed flats and the Louboutins clicking around her was impossible to ignore. Two women in pencil skirts and glossy hair passed by, their eyes flicking over Claire. Another intern. One murmured, "God, they're everywhere this summer." The other replied with a smirk. Claire's cheeks warmed, but she kept her chin up. "Don't let them see you flinch." By 10 o'clock. She was seated at the far end of the 35th floor boardroom, her notebook open, pen poised. The conference table stretched so long it could have doubled as a runway. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glittering sprawl of New York below, but inside, the air was heavy with expectation. This was the quarterly strategy meeting where division. Heads pitched plans that would decide budgets worth millions. Interns weren't supposed to speak. They were there to observe, absorb, and stay invisible. The presentation began. A senior VP, grey at the temples and radiating self-importance, clicked through slides filled with graphs. "As you'll see, the market has flattened. To mitigate risk, our recommendation is to slash advertising by 30% and preserve liquidity. It's the prudent course of action." Claire's pen hesitated over the page. Her stomach knotted. She had just read the Commerce Association's new report on the subway this morning. Every line of that data contradicted what this man was saying. Her thoughts tumbled. If we pulled back now, competitors will dominate. Didn't the case studies prove this? Am I seriously the only one seeing this? She looked around. Executives nodded mechanically, taking notes like disciples at a sermon. Her hand lifted before she could stop herself. "Excuse me," she said, voice clear but shaking. The room froze. Dozens of suits turned to look at her, some with irritation, some with curiosity. Interns did not interrupt board meetings. Claire's pulse hammered, but retreat was no longer an option. With respect, cutting ad spend during a slowdown might backfire. The Commerce Association's Q3 report released just this. Morning shows companies that maintain visibility in downturns recover faster and capture market share. If we disappear now, the cost of re-entry later will be significantly higher. Double quotes silence. Her words hung in the air. Fragile and daring. Then a voice cut through, smooth yet sharp, carrying the weight of command. "Data from this morning." Claire turned toward the head of the table. He was exactly as the rumors described. Ethan Harrington, CEO of Harrington Global. Tall, broad-shouldered, his charcoal suit looked custom-cut for power itself. Dark hair swept back, piercing steel-grey eyes fixed on her with clinical intensity. He had the kind of presence that made men lower their voices and women straighten their posture. Claire's throat tightened, God, why him? Yes, sir, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The Commerce Association published the updated findings at 8 I downloaded the report on my way in. Murmurs rippled across the table. Some executives looked impressed. Others looked like they were already drafting her termination letter. Ethan didn't move, didn't blink. He studied her like she was a puzzle he hadn't decided whether to solve or discard. Seconds stretched like hours. Finally, his lips parted. Sit down. 2 words, flat and final. No praise. No scolding. Just an order that carried the weight of judgment. The rest of the meeting blurred past her. Claire forced herself to keep scribbling notes, though her mind replayed that exchange on a loop. When the session ended, she heard Itlo chuckles as people filed out. Interns these days think they're analysts. She's toast. Her fingers tightened around her notebook until the edges bent. She hurried into the hallway, cheeks flushed, heart pounding. Maybe she'd just ruined her first day. Or maybe, just maybe, she'd set something in motion she couldn't yet see, high above. Behind the tinted glass of his office, Ethan Harrington watched the intern walk away. His expression was unreadable, save for the faintest flicker of intrigue in his eyes. Claire sat at her small desk in the intern bullpen, a cluster of cheap cubicles tucked far from the corner offices. She stared at the glowing computer screen, though the words swam in front of her eyes. Her hand shook slightly as she typed, each keystroke echoing the humiliation from the meeting. Her colleagues hadn't bothered to hide their reactions. 2 of the other interns exchanged looks, smirking. One whispered loud enough for her to hear. Guess she wanted to make a name for herself. Brave or stupid dime, betting stupid. Claire clenched her jaw. She wanted to disappear under the desk. Her ears still rang with Ethan Harrington's voice low, commanding, final. Sit down. Those 2 words replayed over and over, cutting deeper than she wanted to admit. She had spoken up because she believed in the data, because for one reckless moment she thought her voice mattered, but now she wasn't sure if she'd just destroyed her career before it even began. Her chest tightened. I need this internship. Rent, tuition, everything depends on it. God, what was I thinking? She pressed her palm flat against the desk, willing herself to focus. If she crumbled now, she really would prove them right. Meanwhile, several floors above, Ethan Harrington stood by the glass wall of his office. The city sprawling beneath him like a living chessboard. His reflection stared back at him stoic, sharp, untouchable. But his thoughts weren't on the skyline. They were on the girl, the intern. She had looked so small in that oversized blazer, voice trembling when she interrupted. And yet she hadn't faltered. Even under his gaze, she held her ground. Most executives twice her age folded when he looked at them. They lowered their eyes, scrambled for words. But she had quoted data he hadn't even read yet. Bold, reckless, but not unfounded. Ethan exhaled, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth before vanishing as quickly as it came. Interest that was dangerous. Interest distracted men in his position. He pressed the intercom. Send me her file, he ordered his assistant. Minutes later, a slim folder landed on his desk. Ethan skimmed it, eyes narrowing. Claire Miller, 22 State University, full scholarship, top of her class. Waitress for 3 years to cover expenses. First generation college student. His fingers drummed against the folder. Ambitious, resourceful, a fighter. The kind of background that carved resilience into someone's bones. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable to anyone who might have walked in. But inside, something stirred, a faint flicker of curiosity he hadn't felt in years. Downstairs, Claire was still fighting tears she refused to shed. She forced herself to keep working, diving into the spreadsheets they'd assigned her. The numbers steadied her. Numbers didn't gossip. Numbers didn't smirk. Still, her mind betrayed her. Drifting back to the man at the head of the table, his presence had been overwhelming. The way his eyes locked onto hers, grey, unyielding, like a storm you couldn't escape. She'd felt stripped bare, as though he could see every weakness she tried so hard to hide, and yet there had been something else. Just for a second, when she mentioned the new report, she thought she saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Not approval. Not exactly, but not dismissal either. The memory sent a shiver down her spine. She whispered to herself, "Don't read into it, Claire. He doesn't care. He's the Ice King. To him, you're nothing, but deep down." She couldn't shake the feeling that his gaze had lingered a moment too long. That evening, long after most interns had left, Claire remained. The bullpen was silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. Focused on finishing her assignments, she was so absorbed she didn't hear the footsteps until they stopped behind her. Still here. The voice was unmistakably low, smooth, carrying authority even in casual words. Claire's breath caught. She turned, and there he was, Ethan Harrington, every inch, the legend, standing less than 5 feet away. His suit jacket was off, his tie loosened, but the sheer power he carried made the air feel heavier. Her pulse raced. "Yes, sir, I wanted to finish the report." He glanced at the spreadsheet on her screen, then at the worn-out notebook filled with neat handwriting. His eyes softened barely, imperceptibly, but enough to make Claire's heart stumble. "You believe in this theory," he said. It wasn't a question. Claire swallowed. "I do." For a moment, silence stretched between them, charged and heavy. Then Ethan set a paper cup on her desk. Coffee, hot, steaming, the scent filling the air. "Don't collapse before you prove yourself," he said quietly, before she could respond. He turned and walked away, his tall frame disappearing into the shadow of the corridor. Claire stared at the coffee, her hands trembling. The Ice King didn't hand out kindness. He didn't linger in cubicles. Yet here she was, holding evidence that maybe she had sparked something behind those steel-grey eyes, and that possibility terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. The next morning, Claire arrived at Harrington Global earlier than usual. The city was still shaking off yellow cabs honking, steam rising from manholes, but her mind was already a whirlwind. She hadn't slept much. Her thoughts kept circling back to last night, to the quiet moment when Ethan Harrington had stood behind her, to the coffee cup he left on her desk. She told herself it was nothing. A courtesy, a gesture he'd already forgotten, but her heart refused to believe it was meaningless. When she reached her cubicle, her pulse stumbled. The coffee cup was still there, empty now, but she couldn't bring herself to throw it away. "Focus, Claire. He's your boss. Your CEO. He doesn't even remember your name." She slid into her chair, forcing her hands to steady as she opened her laptop. Across the building, in the top-floor office, Ethan Harrington was already scanning the day's reports. His tie was knotted, his hair neatly swept back, but his mind wasn't on numbers. It kept straying to the intern with sharp eyes and a trembling voice that hadn't broken. She'd stayed late. She'd worked through exhaustion. And, unlike most who sought his approval, she hadn't tried to flatter him. She had challenged him. That was why, at 7 a.m., he'd signed a single-page memo and handed it to his assistant. A test. By 9 o'clock, Claire's name was called. She walked into the glass-walled conference room where her supervisor handed her a folder. "You've been reassigned," the woman said briskly. "Mr. Harrington wants you to prepare a preliminary analysis for the Vigatech acquisition. Draft by Monday." Claire blinked. "Me? But I'm just the supervisor's." Expression was unreadable. "Apparently, he wants to see what you can do. Don't waste the opportunity." Her hands trembled as she accepted the folder. Inside were pages of raw financials, market forecasts, and legal jargon that felt like a foreign language. The Vigatech deal was huge. It had been whispered about for weeks, and now she was supposed to analyze it. Panic rose in her throat. This wasn't a task for interns. It wasn't even a task for junior analysts. Back upstairs, Ethan watched her through the tinted glass. He saw the way her shoulders stiffened when she read the first page, the way her lips pressed tight with determination. He told himself this wasn't personal. He tested everyone. He weeded out weakness before it had the chance to spread. But part of him wanted to see how far she could go. Claire spent the rest of the day buried in data. Numbers blurred, acronyms twisted. At lunch, while other interns chatted in the cafeteria, she sat alone at her desk, scribbling notes. Doubt gnawed at her. What if this is a setup? What if he gave me this just to watch me fail? Her chest tightened. She remembered the smirks from yesterday, the whispers, "She's toast." But then she remembered his voice last night. Low and steady. "Don't collapse before you prove yourself." That sentence replayed in her mind, stronger than her fear. As the office thinned out for the evening, Claire was still at her desk, surrounded by financial statements and half-empty coffee cups. Her eyelids burned, but she forced herself to keep going. She didn't notice the shadow fall across her cubicle until a voice spoke. "You'll burn out before Monday if you keep grinding like this." Her head snapped up. Ethan Harrington leaned casually against the partition, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. Even in a more relaxed state, his presence filled the space. Claire's throat tightened. "I want to get it right." His gaze swept over the scattered papers, then back to her face. For a heartbeat, his expression softened. "Tell me your first impression." She hesitated. "Of the acquisition?" He gave a single nod. Claire's mind screamed, "Don't say something stupid." But her instincts pushed forward. Vigatech's numbers looked solid on paper. Too solid. Growth this steady in a volatile sector usually means someone smoothing the edges. "If I had to guess, there's something hidden in their R&D costs." Silence. Ethan studied her, his jaw tightening. That was the same suspicion his top analysts had raised in last night's closed-door meeting, for the first time in years. Ethan felt something unexpected, the stir of anticipation. "You have 3 days," he said finally, his tone clipped but his eyes lingering a fraction too long. "Prove it." Then he walked away, leaving Claire staring after him, heart racing. Breath shallow, the weight of his challenge pressing against her chest like both a curse and a promise. By Friday morning, the office hum had changed. It wasn't the usual click of keyboards or shuffle of papers. It was the low murmur of gossip. Claire felt it the moment she stepped out of the elevator. Conversations hushed as she passed. Smiles turned tight. Some people didn't even bother lowering their voices. Did you hear? Harrington himself assigned her the Vega Tech file, an intern. Can you believe it? What's she got that the rest of us don't? Please, we all know what she's got. It's not brains. Claire's stomach sank. She clutched the strap of her bag tighter and walked faster, trying not to let the sting reach her face. But each whisper felt like a dagger. At her cubicle, she buried herself in paperwork. Numbers, graphs, ratios. They were her only defense. If she focused hard enough, maybe the words would fade. But they didn't. At lunch, the cafeteria that once buzzed with chatter now felt hostile. Her fellow interns sat together at one long table, laughing loudly, not once inviting her. When she passed, a girl in a red blazer gave her a sugary smile. Wow, Claire. You must be really impressive to catch Mr. Harrington's attention. The tone said the opposite. Claire muttered a thanks and sat alone in the corner, her sandwich untouched. Inside, anger wrestled with humiliation. She had fought to be here. She had spoken up because she believed in the data. She hadn't asked for his attention, hadn't schemed for special treatment. But in their eyes, she was already guilty. Prove yourself, she reminded herself, gripping her notebook until her knuckles turned white. Do the work. Let the results speak. Upstairs, Ethan Harrington leaned against the window of his office, arms folded, watching the city traffic crawl below. But his thoughts weren't on the deal. They were on her. He'd heard the whispers. Gossip traveled fast in this building, and nothing about him escaped notice. He should have expected it. A young intern suddenly thrown into the orbit of the CEO, it was bound to spark speculation. Still, the bitterness of it unsettled him. He had seen the way she stiffened when she walked through the halls, the way she kept her head down, jaw tight, pretending the barbs didn't cut. Most people would crumble under that weight, but she hadn't left. She hadn't run. She kept working. A memory flickered, her eyes locking with his in the boardroom, hazel bright against the cold steel of his own gaze. That fire, that refusal to back down, it was rare, too rare and dangerous. Ethan closed the folder in his hands with a snap, pushing the thought away. Curiosity was a luxury he couldn't afford. She was an intern, a test, nothing more. So why did the image of her sitting alone in the cafeteria, shoulders tense against the tide of whispers, stick with him long after he should have let it go? That evening, Claire stayed late again. The bullpen was deserted, the hum of the HVAC filling the silence. She traced her pen across the spreadsheets, chasing patterns until her vision blurred. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate. You alive? Or did Wall Street eat you already? Claire smiled faintly, but exhaustion weighed heavy. She leaned back, staring at the skyline outside the window. For the first time since she'd started, doubt crept in. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe this test isn't a chance, it's a trap. Her throat tightened. But then she remembered the way Ethan had said it, voice low, deliberate. You have 3 days. Prove it. Not fail. Not quit. Prove it. Something in her chest steadied. She bent forward, pen in hand, and kept going. Meanwhile, in the dimly lit office above, Ethan paused as he passed the bullpen on his way out. Through the glass, he saw her still at her desk, head bent, the glow of the screen reflecting determination in her tired eyes. For a long moment, he stood there, unseen, watching. Then, with a slow exhale, he turned and walked away, the echo of her resilience following him into the night. Monday morning arrived with a chill that cut through Manhattan. Claire's eyes ached from the weekend she'd spent poring over Vigatech's financials, but she clutched her neatly bound report like it was armor. She stepped into the glass conference room where the executive team was already gathering. Ethan Harrington sat at the head of the table, expression unreadable. When Claire handed him the file, his fingers brushed hers brief, cool. Professional yet, it sent a jolt through her chest. He flipped through the pages in silence. The room held its breath. Finally, he set the report down. Not bad, 2 words. No smile, no praise. But to Claire, it was oxygen. Then he added, "You're coming with us to Boston. Vigatech's headquarters. Tomorrow." Claire blinked. "Me? Yes. You found the red flags. You'll defend them." His tone was final, leaving no room for refusal. Around the table, a few executives shifted uncomfortably. One smirked, as if to say, "This intern won't last a day out there." Claire's stomach twisted. A business trip with Ethan Harrington. She wasn't sure if this was opportunity or a sentence. The next morning, Claire found herself at LaGuardia Airport, standing awkwardly beside the sharply dressed team of analysts and lawyers. She wore her best navy blazer, still thrifted, but pressed to perfection, and clutched her carry-on like a lifeline. Ethan arrived last, cutting through the terminal like he owned it. Even in a simple overcoat, his presence commanded space. Conversations dulled, eyes followed. Claire had to force herself to look away before she got caught staring. On the flight, she was wedged into the seat beside him. The proximity was suffocating. She could smell faint cedar and something darker, his cologne. Subtle but inescapable. Her notebook lay open on her lap, filled with scribbled notes and highlighted figures. She tried to focus, but the warmth radiating from him made her pulse trip. After a long silence, Ethan spoke without looking up from his laptop. "You're nervous," Claire stiffened. "I know. I'm prepared." A faint curve ghosted his lips, the closest thing she'd ever seen to a smile. "Good answer," she exhaled slowly, realizing she'd been holding her breath. Boston greeted them with grey skies and drizzle. The meeting at Vigatech was tense. Their executives presented glowing numbers. But Claire spotted the inconsistencies, immediately the same R&D costs she had flagged. When a Vigatech director challenged Harrington Global's concerns, Ethan glanced at her. Just once, a silent command. Claire's throat tightened. Everyone's eyes turned her way. She could almost hear the thoughts. An intern. But she forced her voice steady. "With respect, your R&D budget has been flat for 3 consecutive quarters while your reported growth has surged. That doesn't add up. Either the numbers are inflated or your innovation pipeline is stagnant. Neither option is attractive for acquisition." The room went still. Ethan leaned back, watching her with a glint in his eye, pride, or perhaps satisfaction. The Vigatech team bristled, but the seed of doubt had been planted. That night, the Harrington team checked into a downtown hotel. The lobby buzzed with business travelers, the smell of rain clinging to their coats. Claire collected her keycard, exhaustion dragging at her limbs. But when she reached her floor, she froze. Her room was directly across from his. Of all the doors on all the floors, she slipped inside quickly, her pulse racing. She told herself it didn't matter. It was coincidence. Still, the awareness pressed at her as she unpacked, every sound in the hallway magnified, every footstep making her wonder if it was him. Later, When she went down to the hotel bar for a much-needed glass of water, she found him already there, alone at a corner table. No entourage, no phone in hand. Just Ethan Harrington, tie loosened, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, Claire forgot to breathe. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. Not a command this time. An invitation. Her legs carried her forward before her brain could object. When she sat, silence stretched thick, charged. The clink of ice in his glass was the only sound. "You handled yourself today," he said at last, his voice low, intimate in the dim light. Claire swallowed. "I just did my job." His gaze lingered on her, steady and unreadable, but softer than she'd ever seen. Most interns wouldn't have dared. "You did." Her chest tightened. She wanted to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. The distance between them shrank not physically, but in the quiet recognition that something had shifted. They were no longer just CEO and intern. For the first time, they were two people, caught in a moment that neither quite knew how to name, and it terrified her. The Boston trip ended with a quiet flight back to New York. Claire spent the entire journey staring out the window, her reflection pale against the darkening sky. She kept replaying the moment at the hotel bar. The way Ethan's eyes had lingered on her, the way the silence between them had felt charged, dangerous. She told herself it meant nothing. He was her boss, the CEO, a man with empires to run and no reason to notice an intern. But her heart refused to listen. By Tuesday morning, the whispers started. Claire knew something was wrong the instant she stepped into the office. Conversations halted when she walked past. Heads bent together, voices dropped to a hiss. Eyes flicked toward her, and then away. At first she thought it was the usual gossip about vegan, but then she caught the words. Boston, Harrington, hotel, room across the hall. Of course, that's how she got the project. Her stomach dropped. By noon, the cafeteria was buzzing. Someone had seen her walk out of the elevator with Ethan in Boston. Someone else swore they saw them at the hotel bar. Each retelling added new layers. Dinner together, drinks too close. Lingering looks by the time Claire sat down with her tray. The story had grown into a full-blown affair. Figures, a woman in a navy suit sneered, loud enough for half the room to hear. "She's not the first intern to cozy up to the boss." Heat rushed to Claire's cheeks. She pushed her food away, appetite gone, pulse hammering in her ears. They don't know. They don't know what really happened. But the truth didn't matter. In their eyes, she was already guilty upstairs. Ethan Harrington was in his office when his assistant Lydia hesitated at the door. "Sir, there are rumors circulating. About Boston. About you and the intern." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Rumors. Yes, they're spreading fast." For a long moment, he said nothing, his gaze fixed on the skyline beyond the glass. Then, in a voice low and controlled, he asked, "Who started them?" Lydia shifted. "Hard to say, but it's becoming disruptive." Ethan dismissed her with a curt nod. The door closed, leaving him alone with his thoughts. He should have expected it. An intern traveling with him, sitting beside him in meetings, caught in the same hotel. Of course, the vultures would circle. He had lived long enough in the spotlight to know perception mattered more than truth, and yet, the thought of Claire alone, enduring the whispers, her reputation shredded before it even began, ignited something in his chest. He couldn't quite name protectiveness, anger, guilt, feelings he had no business entertaining. By the end of the day, Claire couldn't take it anymore. She ducked into an empty stairwell, pressing her back against the cold concrete wall. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone, her reflection blurred in the darkened screen. Maybe I should quit. Walk away before this gets worse. Her throat tightened. She had worked so hard, fought so long just to stand here, and now one rumor threatened to undo everything. Footsteps echoed. She froze, shoving her phone into her pocket. Ethan stepped into the stairwell, his presence filling the narrow space. He looked at her not as CEO, not as the Ice King, but as a man seeing the damage done. "They're talking," Claire whispered, her voice breaking. "They think I'm..." She couldn't even say the word. His jaw hardened. "I know." Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back. "It's not true. I don't care what they think." His voice was sharp, almost too sharp. Then it softened, just slightly. "What matters is that you know the truth. And I know it too." Her chest ached at the conviction in his tone. But even as his words settled over her like armor, a new fear clawed at her heart. Because standing this close, with his gaze burning into hers, she realized something terrifying. It wasn't the rumors that scared her most. It was how much she wanted them to be true. The following morning, Claire walked into Harrington Global with her shoulders squared, even though her chest was heavy with dread. The whispers hadn't stopped. If anything, they'd grown sharper. Every elevator glance, every hushed laugh felt like a knife twisting deeper. By the time she reached her desk, her supervisor was waiting. "Mr. Harrington wants you in the boardroom," she said flatly. Claire's stomach sank. This is it. He's going to cut me loose. End the rumors. End the distraction. She gathered her notebook with trembling hands and forced herself toward the 35th floor. The boardroom was packed. Division heads lined the long mahogany table, folders spread open, eyes flicking up as Claire entered. At the head sat Ethan Harrington, posture as rigid as the steel grey suit he wore. "Miss Miller," he said, his voice cool, commanding. "Take a seat." Her heart pounded as she slid into a chair at the far end, trying to make herself small. The meeting began discussions of the Vega Tech deal, strategy projections, quarterly forecasts. Claire barely heard a word. Every nerve in her body screamed that she didn't belong here, that this was a trial and the verdict had already been decided. Then, halfway through, an older board member cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Mr. Harrington, some of us are concerned about appearances." His gaze cut to Claire. "Sending an intern to Boston, sitting her beside you in meetings, in the same hotel well, it raises questions. Questions that could tarnish the firm's reputation." The words landed like a slap. Claire's chest tightened. She wanted to vanish, but Ethan didn't flinch. Slowly, he set his pen down and looked around the room. His voice, when it came, was raised. "If anyone here believes this intern is present because of anything other than merit, you're mistaken." Murmurs rippled across the table. Claire's breath caught. She identified irregularities in Vegatech's financials that none of you flagged. Ethan continued, his gaze sweeping over the executives. "Irregularities that could cost us millions if ignored." She worked nights to prepare an analysis that exposed the truth. Her report is the reason we have leverage in these negotiations. Silence. No one dared interrupt. Ethan's eyes locked briefly with Claire's. For the first time, there was no mask of indifference. Only conviction. She has earned her place in this room. If anyone questions that, they can take it up with me. The statement hung heavy. Final, impossible to challenge, one by one. The board members lowered their eyes. Claire sat frozen, her throat tight, her pulse roaring in her ears. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but no words came. The humiliation of the rumors still burned, but now, layered beneath it, was something else. Gratitude, relief, and something far more dangerous. The sharp, undeniable pull of his defense. His faith in her. For a man like Ethan Harrington to stand in front of an entire board and put his weight behind hurt meant everything, too much. The meeting continued, but Claire heard nothing else. When it finally adjourned, she gathered her things quickly, desperate to escape before anyone could see the tears threatening her eyes. But as she reached the door, Ethan's voice stopped her. "Miss Miller, stay." The room emptied until it was just the two of them. The hum of the city faint through the glass walls. Ethan stood, walking to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, rumors will always exist. In this world, perception is currency. But facts matter more. He turned, his gaze locking onto hers. "And the fact is you're good. Better than most who've sat in that chair." Claire's breath hitched. Why are you telling me this?" His eyes softened, just slightly. "Because you need to hear it. And because I don't tolerate talent being destroyed by petty whispers." The silence stretched, thick and electric. Claire's chest tightened, her pulse stumbling. She should thank him. She should leave, but instead, she found herself whispering, "They'll still think. They'll still believe there's something between us." Ethan's jaw clenched. He stepped closer, each movement measured, deliberate, until the space between them shrank to nothing but a breath. "Let them think what they want," he said quietly. "As long as you know the truth." But the way his eyes lingered on hers, the heat coiled in the air, it didn't feel like denial. It felt like a promise, waiting to break. The rest of the week blurred into late nights and endless numbers. Claire tried to lose herself in spreadsheets, to remind herself that she was here to work, not to feel. But no matter how hard she focused, Ethan's words in the boardroom haunted her. "She has earned her place in this room. Better than most who've sat in that chair." It wasn't just the defense, it was the conviction behind it. For a man known as the Ice King, those words had carried fire, and she couldn't ignore the way his eyes lingered, not with cold scrutiny, but with something warmer, more dangerous. Friday evening, the office emptied early. Most employees scattered to happy hours and weekend escapes. But Claire stayed, hunched over the Vegatech files, determined to prove his faith wasn't misplaced. By the time the clock neared 9, she was alone. The hum of the city outside was her only company. She rubbed her eyes, reaching for her coffee cold now. Untouched, still here, the voice came from the doorway. Her head snapped up. Ethan leaned against the frame, no jacket, tie undone, sleeves rolled to his forearms. In this softened state, he looked less like the untouchable CEO and more like a man still powerful, but human. Claire's pulse stumbled. "I wanted to finish this section before Monday." He stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping over the papers scattered across her desk. "You've already done more than most analysts on this team." Heat rushed to her cheeks. Praise from him was rarer than diamonds. She ducked her head. "I just don't want to disappoint you." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Silence followed. Heavy, charged. When she looked up, Ethan was closer to close. His eyes locked on hers, grey and intense, as though he could see straight into the fear and longing she tried so hard to bury. "You won't," he said. Quietly, Claire's chest ached. She should look away. She should remind herself that this was her boss, that the rumors already tore at her reputation. But she couldn't move. The air between them crackled, thick with something unspoken. Ethan's jaw tightened. He seemed to fight himself, every line of his body pulled taut with restraint. His hand hovered, almost reaching for the folder on her desk, but it lingered too near her own. "Claire." His voice was lower now, rougher. Not the CEO's voice, but a man's. Her name in his mouth made her shiver, for a suspended heartbeat. The world outside ceased to exist. No boardrooms, no whispers, no titles. Just two people standing on the edge of something they weren't supposed to want. But then Ethan drew back, the spell snapping. He straightened, his face once more the Ice King's mask. "Go home," he said firmly. "Rest, you'll need it." Claire's breath trembled as she nodded. When he left, the room felt colder, but the ghost of his nearness lingered, burning into her skin. She buried her face in her hands, her heart pounding with equal parts dread and longing. She knew she should be terrified of what almost happened, and yet some part of her wished he hadn't pulled away. Meanwhile, upstairs in his penthouse, Ethan poured himself a drink he didn't touch. His reflection in the glass wall stared back, accusing. "You're crossing lines you swore you wouldn't." She's an intern, vulnerable, off limits, but no matter how many times he told himself this, he couldn't forget the look in her eyes, the fire, the fear, the pull that mirrored his own. He closed his eyes, exhaling hard. For years, he had built walls of steel around himself, keeping everyone at a distance. But now, for the first time in a long time, someone had slipped past them, and that terrified him more than any deal, any rival, any scandal. Monday morning, the tension in Harrington Global was palpable. The Vegatech negotiations had reached a critical stage, and every department buzzed like a hive on edge. Claire walked through the lobby with her notebook clutched to her chest, her nerves raw. She had spent the weekend replaying Friday night, the way Ethan's voice had dipped when he said her name, the way he had leaned closer before pulling back. She had convinced herself it was nothing, a momentary slip, but her heart refused to believe. She told herself to focus on work. Yet the moment she stepped into the 35th floor boardroom, her eyes sought him out. Ethan sat at the head of the table, cold and composed as ever. But when his gaze briefly met hers, she swore she saw the flicker of something recognition, memory, restraint, and her pulse stumbled. The meeting with Vegatech's executives turned volatile. Voices rose, accusations flew. Their CFO slammed a report on the table, insisting Harrington Global's concerns were baseless. Ethan remained calm, but his eyes cut to Claire. A silent command. Her throat tightened. Everyone was watching. Board members, Vegatech directors, even the press, allowed in for a brief photo opportunity that had turned into a tense standoff. This was bigger than any test she'd faced, but Ethan had trusted her before. She had to prove she was worthy of it again. Claire drew a steadying breath and pushed her chair back. "With respect," she said, her voice clear across the room, "these numbers don't lie. Vegatech's R&D costs have remained stagnant while revenue spikes. The pattern is inconsistent with sustainable growth. If you want us to believe this acquisition is worth billions, you need to explain the discrepancy." Gasps rippled. A junior intern challenging corporate giants. Unthinkable. Cameras clicked. The Vegatech CFO's face flushed with anger. This is outrageous. Harrington, you let your intern question our integrity. All eyes snapped to Ethan. He rose slowly, his presence commanding the room into silence. She's not just an intern, he said, his voice steel. She's the reason we saw through your performance theater. If you can't answer her, then perhaps we've learned all we need to know about Vegatech. Shock froze the air. Claire's chest tightened, her heart leaping. He hadn't just defended her, he had elevated her. In front of everyone, the meeting adjourned in chaos. Executives rushed to salvage face. Journalists scribbled furiously. Claire slipped out, her body trembling with adrenaline. She ducked into a side corridor, her hands pressed to her burning cheeks. Then she heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Ethan. He followed her into the empty hallway, his expression unreadable, his energy electric. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched, thick with everything unsaid. Finally, Claire whispered, "Why did you do that? You put your reputation on the line for me." His jaw tightened. "Because you were right. That's not all," she pressed, her voice breaking. "You could have defended the data without defending me. Why? Why are you?" Her words caught as he stepped closer. So close she could feel the heat of him, the restrained force in his body. His eyes locked on hers, storm grey and burning. "Because I can't ignore you," he said hoarsely. Her breath hitched. The air between them sizzled, charged with the truth neither had dared speak. Her heart screamed warnings about rumors, careers, lines they couldn't uncross. But her body betrayed her, leaning into the gravity, pulling them together. "Ethan," she whispered, his name trembling on her lips for the first time. And then, in a moment that felt inevitable, his hand brushed her cheek, gentle, reverent, dangerous. The world outside disappeared. No boardrooms, no headlines, no rules. Just him, just her, and the fragile, explosive space where they finally collided. The moment Ethan's hand brushed her cheek, the dam inside Claire cracked. His lips met hers, tentative at first, then deepening with a hunger she hadn't known she craved. For one breathless heartbeat, she forgot everything. The rumors, the hierarchy, the danger, it all vanished beneath the roar. Electric pull between them. When he finally pulled back, their foreheads rested together, his breath uneven. "This is wrong," he murmured, though his thumb still lingered against her skin. "I know," she whispered, but neither of them moved away. The next morning, Claire entered the office with trembling hands and a storm in her chest. She had barely slept, replaying the kiss again and again. It had been real, too real, but the walls of Harrington Global weren't kind. By mid-morning, whispers rose again, sharper than before. "Did you see them leave the building last night? Together, she's not even hiding it anymore. No wonder she's still here. He protects her." Claire's face burned as she walked past clusters of co-workers. Their eyes sliced into her like blades. When she reached her desk, an email was waiting. Mandatory HR meeting, 2 p.m. Her stomach dropped. In his top-floor office, Ethan stared at the same email forwarded by his legal team. His jaw clenched as the board's message became clear. This has gone too far. For years, he had built his empire on discipline, on keeping himself untouchable. But one slip, one kiss, and now the vultures smelled blood. Still, when he pictured Claire Small in her cubicle, drowning under whispers, something inside him hardened. He had defended her once. He would do it again, no matter the cost. At 2 o'clock, Claire sat in a glass-walled HR office, her pulse racing. The HR director's voice was clipped, professional. "Miss Miller, there are concerns regarding your relationship with Mr. Harrington. For your protection and for the company's, we need to clarify boundaries." Claire's mouth went dry. "There is no relationship," she said quickly, though the memory of Ethan's lips burned against hers. The director's eyes narrowed, unconvinced. "Be careful, Miss Miller. Careers have ended over less." Tears stung, but she blinked them back. She couldn't break here. That evening, as the office emptied, Ethan found her at her desk, staring blankly at her screen. "They called me into HR," she whispered, her voice frayed. "They think she couldn't finish." Ethan's gaze softened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Let them think what they want. I'll handle it." Her chest ached. "But what about me? My career? If this keeps going, they'll destroy me." His eyes darkened with conflict, but his voice was steady. "Then we make a choice. Either we draw the line here, or we stop pretending there is one." Claire's breath caught. Her heart screamed both yes and no, torn between everything she had worked for and everything she suddenly couldn't imagine losing, for the first time. The decision wasn't just his, it was hers too, and it would change everything. Claire barely remembered the subway ride home that night. The blur of neon lights through the window, the chatter of strangers, the screech of wheels against rails, it all faded into the background as her thoughts churned. Either we draw the line here, or we stop pretending there is one. Ethan's words had echoed all the way home, heavy, relentless. She lay awake in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling. Her scholarship, her rent, her future, they all hung on this internship. If she let herself fall into whatever this was, the whispers could turn into headlines. HR wouldn't just question her, they'd bury her. And yet, when she closed her eyes, she didn't see numbers or boardrooms. She saw him. The way his voice softened when he said her name, the heat in his gaze when the mask slipped, the kiss that had shattered every wall she'd built around herself. Her chest ached. What if this costs me everything? But what if walking away costs me more? The next morning, Ethan stood alone in his penthouse kitchen, coffee untouched, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. He had spent his life building walls, carving himself into a man of steel. Relationships were liabilities. Attachment was weakness. That was the rule he had lived by, until her, Claire. Miller, an intern who should have been invisible, had cracked the armor without even trying. Her courage in the boardroom, her resilience under fire, the fire in her hazel eyes, she made him want. Something he hadn't allowed himself in years. But wanting her meant putting her in danger. His enemies would use her. The board would weaponize her. He knew it, and still the memory of her lips haunted him like a brand. He muttered under his breath, voice harsh with self-loathing, "You're crossing a line you swore you never would." But when he closed his eyes, all he saw was her face, and the line blurred again that afternoon. Claire found herself summoned not to HR, not to her cubicle, but to Ethan's office. The top floor was eerily quiet. She stepped inside, her pulse racing, and found him standing by the window, as if the city itself were his battlefield. "Close the door," he said. The click of the latch felt final. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them was thick with everything left unsaid. Finally, Claire broke the silence, her voice trembling. They want me gone. You know that, right? HR, the board, everyone. They think the only reason I'm here is because of us. Ethan turned, his gaze burning into hers. You're here because you're brilliant. Because you saw what no one else did. Because you've earned it. Don't let them steal that from you. Her throat tightened. But what if they force me to choose? My career or you? The words slipped out before she could stop them, and the rawness in her own voice stunned her. Ethan crossed the room in 3 long strides. He stopped just short of touching her, his presence overwhelming, his restraint fraying. Then choose, he said, his voice low, rough. But don't lie to yourself about what you want. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She wanted both her future, her independence, her chance to prove herself. But she also wanted him in a way that terrified her more than failure ever had. Tears stung her eyes. I don't know if I'm strong enough. His hand hovered, almost touching hers, then pulled back at the last second. His jaw clenched. You are, he said softly. You've been stronger than anyone in that boardroom since the day you walked in. Claire's breath caught. For a heartbeat, she almost reached for him. Almost, but then she stepped back, her voice shaking. I need time. Ethan's eyes darkened, but he gave a single nod. Then take it. But understand this, Claire, time won't change what's between us. Her chest constricted. She turned and walked out before the weight of his words broke her resolve. And as the door closed behind her, she realized the truth that terrified her most. No matter what choice she made, there was no going back. The news broke on a Wednesday morning. Claire had just stepped off the subway when her phone buzzed with a flood of messages. Friends, classmates, even her roommate. All with the same subject line. Harrington Global CEO linked to young intern amid Vegatech deal. Her breath caught. She tapped the link. There, on the screen, was a grainy photo. Her and Ethan in Boston, exiting the hotel lobby side by side. His hand not touching her, but close enough to look intimate. Her head tilted toward him, caught mid-laugh. The headline screamed, "Scandal." Claire's stomach dropped by the time she reached the office. The whispers had become stares. Not the hidden, behind-your-back stares she was used to open, cutting, relentless. Phones lifted as she passed, screens glowing with the article. Her supervisor didn't look her in the eye when she muttered, HR wants you, again. Meanwhile, upstairs. Ethan slammed the paper down on his desk. His legal team circled like hawks, spouting damage control strategies. We can deny. Issue a statement. Call it fabricated, or we spin it. Say it's a mentoring program. Ethan's voice cut through, sharp as steel. No, the room fell silent. He stood, hands braced against the desk, eyes like storm clouds. I will not let them drag her name through the mud to protect me. His lawyers exchanged nervous glances. But sir, if you admit I said no. His tone brooked no argument. For the first time in years, Ethan Harrington chose not to hide. Claire sat in the glass-walled HR office, her hands shaking in her lap. The director's tone was clipped, rehearsed. Miss Miller, this situation compromises the company's image. For your own good, we suggest you resign immediately. Her chest constricted. Resign, after everything. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the door burst open. Ethan, his presence filled the room like a thunderclap. The HR director stumbled to her feet. Mr. Harrington, we were just... She's not resigning, Ethan said coldly. She stays. Shock rippled through the room. Claire's heart pounded, torn between relief and terror. The director sputtered, "But the optics, then I'll handle the optics." His gaze cut across the room, daring anyone to challenge him. No one did. He turned to Claire, his expression softer but no less intense. "You don't walk away from this. Not because of them. Not because of lies." Her breath trembled. "Ethan?" For the first time, he didn't care who heard. He stepped closer, his voice low but clear enough for every corner of the office. "They can twist this however they want. But I won't let them take you from me." The HR director gasped. Phones buzzed outside the glass walls as the staff beyond whispered, recording every word with hungry eyes. Claire's world tilted. In a single moment, the line they had tried to balance shattered. There was no denying it anymore. Ethan Harrington had chosen her, publicly, and the whole world now knew. By Thursday, the story had gone national. Claire's face was splashed across headlines she never imagined. Ice King CEO and his intern scandal. Is this the real reason behind Harrington's Vegatech gamble? Reporters camped outside Harrington Global. Paparazzi lurked near Claire's apartment. The sound of cameras clicking haunted her every step. She tried to keep her head down, but the whispers followed everywhere, at coffee shops, in the subway, even in her inbox. Anonymous emails accused her of sleeping her way to power. Strangers on social media tore apart her photos, her clothes, her smile. Her scholarship sponsors called. The university wanted clarification. Everything she had built felt like it was crumbling beneath her feet. That evening, she sat alone in her apartment, lights off, phone buzzing relentlessly. She buried her face in her hands. "I can't do this. I didn't ask for this." A knock at the door made her flinch. Claire, Ethan's voice, when she opened the door. He stood there in a dark coat, rain dripping from his hair. His expression torn between fury and worry. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, fear in her chest. "If they see you, I don't care." He stepped inside, shutting the door firmly. His presence filled the tiny apartment, making it feel both safer and more dangerous at once. "You don't understand," Claire said, her voice cracking. "They're destroying me. My name, my future, everything's gone." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then let me fix it." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You can't fix this. You're the reason it started." The words cut him, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice low, raw. "Then I'll end it. I'll take the blame, all of it. Tomorrow I'll call a press conference. I'll tell them this isn't your scandal, it's mine." Claire's chest seized. "If you do that, the board will." "I built this company," he said fiercely. "I can burn it down if I have to, but I won't let them ruin you." Tears welled in her eyes. No man had ever fought for her like this, but the cost terrified her. "Ethan, if you lose everything, what's left?" He didn't hesitate. "You," the word fell between them, heavy, irrevocable. Claire's resolve crumbled. For the first time, she let herself believe. And in that moment, through the storm outside and the fire inside, she realized this wasn't just a scandal. It was love. The next day, the world held its breath. The press conference hall overflowed with journalists, cameras flashing like lightning. Ethan Harrington walked to the podium, the Ice King no more, but a man stripped bare. Claire stood hidden backstage, her hands trembling, her heart in her throat. He faced the crowd, his voice steady, commanding. "There has been speculation about myself and one of my employees. Let me be clear. This woman has not exploited her position. She has not taken advantage of mine. If there is anyone to blame for blurred lines, it is me, not her. The room erupted in questions. Ethan raised a hand, silencing them. She is brilliant. She is fearless, and she has earned every accomplishment on her own. If defending her costs me my reputation, my company, my fortune, so be it. Because some things are worth more than empires. Gasps rippled. Headlines were already writing themselves. Backstage, Claire's tears fell freely. Later, when the cameras were gone and the crowd dispersed, she found him alone. Shoulders heavy, but eyes still burning with defiance. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "Yes, I did," he replied. His hand reached for hers, not in secrecy, not in hesitation, but openly. "Claire, I've spent years thinking walls made me strong. But you taught me strength isn't shutting the world out. It's letting someone in." Her heart swelled, breaking and healing all at once. She gripped his hand tightly. "Then let's face it together." For the first time in years, Ethan Harrington smiled, small, genuine, unguarded, and as they walked out into the storm of flashbulbs, side by side, Claire realized her choice was made, not career or love, but both, because together they would fight for both, and no rumor, no scandal, no empire could take that away.